Okay, everyone, welcome back. We have done a pretty thorough job now of discussing how blood is transported through our body. And now let's turn our attention to talking about how oxygen gets into that and how carbon dioxide is leaving. So, gas exchange is sometimes called respiration or breathing. Um, I don't want you to get that confused with cellular respiration, which is getting energy from food. But cellular respiration does require a constant supply of oxygen and disposal of carbon dioxide. So the processes are related to each other. Cellular respiration requires gas exchange. And there's three phases of gas exchange in humans. The first is breathing, so actually getting the air into your body, then transport of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the blood, then gas exchange with the body cells. So into your body, into your blood, into your cells. And that gas exchange with your body cells is going to involve your body tissues taking up oxygen and releasing the carbon dioxide. I want you to stop and think for a minute about like what atmospheric pressure is, right? Like the pressure of all the molecules in the air around us, or water pressure is the pressure of all the molecules in water. But how much of that is due to like the oxygen in the air? How much of that is due to the carbon dioxide? That's what partial pressure is. Partial pressure is what one particular gas, how much that pressure is in a mixture of gases. You can calculate the partial pressure of a particular gas in the air, or also that gas dissolved in liquids or in water, and figure out what the partial pressure is. And then what's interesting is that when water and air are in contact with each other, there will be an equilibrium where the partial pressures are the same for the air and the liquid. It doesn't mean the concentrations are the same. It just means that concentration. I'm sorry. It just means that pressure of the two is going to be equal. So you can actually calculate, how is air going to move, or how is oxygen going to move, how is carbon dioxide going to move from one solution to the air, or from the air into the solution. How much oxygen is going to be soluble in water is going to depend on what kind of temperature the water is, what kind of salt concentration is in the water. But oxygen is much less soluble in water than in air. So in animals that live in the land breathing air, we have a much easier time getting oxygen out of the air because there's so much more compared to how much is in the water. Air has a high oxygen content. It's also less dense and less viscous. That makes it a very easy respiratory medium for us. Temperature also affects how much oxygen is in there. Warm air has more energy. The molecules are far apart, so there's less oxygen in a particular volume. In cold air, the molecules are closer together, so there's more oxygen in a particular volume. How gas is exchanging, though, is going to depend on what kind of respiratory media we're talking about. So that would be liquid, air, the temperature, and also some other factors. Temperature in water has a similar effect as in air. Salinity also affects the ability of oxygen or other molecules to be dissolved. Salt water has more solids already in it, so there's less water that can dissolve gases. That water is already involved with dissolving, like the salt. So fresh water has more water left to dissolve gases, so there's more oxygen in that fresh water. Movement also affects it. Turbulent water has more motion, so gases are able to mix into it more. Still water has less motion, so less gases are mixed in to be dissolved. So all of this, what you should take in from that is cold, fresh water holds more oxygen. Warm, salt water holds less oxygen. And we're going to see in these animals that live in the water, especially where there's warm salt water, that a lot of energy goes into getting that oxygen out of the air, out of the water into their bodies to use. So most animals have respiratory surfaces that allow gas exchange to happen by diffusion, although there's different respiratory surfaces in different animals. But typically they're going to be moist and thin. And being moist and thin allows oxygen to diffuse in and carbon dioxide to leave as a waste. If you remember, some animals, so earthworms and amphibians, their skin is a respiratory surface. So they're able to breathe right through their skin. So earthworms, some types of amphibians, they're typically going to stay where it's moist, and they're able to get that water through their skin from the water that they're in, from the moist area that they're in. Gills are outfoldings of the body, so they actually come out from the animal, they're typically folded a lot to allow a large surface area. There's typically much more surface area in a gill than there is across all of the skin surface of that animal. It also increases the amount of water that is in contact with the gills through ventilation. So ventilation means they're either moving through the water to get water passing over their gills, or moving water over their gills. So like a mollusk using cilia to move water across their gills to keep that ventilation happening. That keeps the partial pressures of oxygen and carbon dioxide that it needs for gas exchange. There's also a countercurrent flow of water and blood. So here water is moving across the gill this way, while the blood is moving from the veins to the arteries this way. So here, where there's lots of oxygen in the water, is where it's also starting off. There's plenty of oxygen in the blood, but there's more in the water, so it's able to be brought into the blood. As the water is moving down, the oxygen is being pulled out of the water, so there's less and less water. There's less and less oxygen left in the water as the water is flowing down, but at the same time, there's less and less oxygen in the blood, so it's still able to pull in that oxygen from the water into the blood. So that allows a lot of oxygen to be brought into that gill, into the blood. I'm going to come back and make a second video to play this clip about how fish gills work and how gas exchange occurs in fish gills. These are really important, so either download this file and watch them, or watch that second video I'm going to post for you, so that you can really see how these fish gills are working and allowing this countercurrent flow, how ventilation is going on, how oxygen is being brought into that organism. Some animals on land, insects specifically, have a tracheal system. And a tracheal system is these a bunch of tubes in the animal that open up to the outside and then go through, and the tubes connect to the body cells. So directly in, we're having diffusion happen straight through these tubes into the body cells. Circulatory system is separate from the respiratory system. So we're not taking oxygen to a circulatory system. That is a separate system from their respiratory system. Some insects will make movements to allow more air to come in. So like an insect, when it's flying, needing a lot of energy, usually those muscles involved in flight will also help direct air into their trachea. Then in animals like us, we have lungs. And lungs are an infolding of the body surface. So they don't go out of our body, they're in our body. But we still have a lot of surface area being developed in this lung surface. The circulatory system, whether it's open or closed, is going to connect the lungs to the rest of the body. Amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals use lungs. And in mammals, these ducts are going to branch and transport air to the lungs, to the thoracic area, and it's going to be enclosed by ribs and by a diaphragm. So ribs are the bones that are going to cover the lungs, and then the diaphragm is a muscle that's going to go right here. The airway also is covered in mucus, which removes debris. So if you're breathing in things like dust or some sort of contaminants, it'll get stuck in that mucus. And then the mucus is actually pushed upward, where you can cough it up or cough it up into to be swallowed. So why does the position of lung tissues within the body, how does that provide an advantage for terrestrial animals? That's something you're going to have to kind of think about these past few slides, what we've been talking about, kind of put all that information together. You may need to read through your book to get your thoughts together. But how does the position of lung tissues within the body an advantage for terrestrial animals? In our respiratory system, air is going to enter the nostrils. And in the nostrils, there's nose hairs that are going to filter out dust and debris. And in nostrils, the air will be warmed and humidified. And it'll also be sampled for odors. That means you can smell stuff that you're breathing in. From there, the nasal cavity is going to take what you breathed in to the pharynx. And then air will enter the larynx. So at this pharynx, you remember we have this intersection where it can either go down the larynx or to the digestive system. And if you're eating, there's an epiglottis that covers the glottis, so food can't get into the trachea. But when you're breathing, that epiglottis is going to be opened up so that you can breathe down into your lungs. Here you also, in most mammals, will find vocal cords. Those vocal cords are sometimes called your voice box. That is what you can use air and pressure to create sounds and speech and songs. Then the trachea is the windpipe, and your trachea is reinforced with cartilage. That cartilage is very strong so that it keeps this open. You don't just suck in air and collapse it. It keeps that breathing tube open so that you're able to keep breathing. Then the trachea is going to branch into two bronchi. So these are your two bronchi. That one is going to go into each lung. Again, we're looking at someone face on. So this is the right lung and this is the left lung. Then within those two bronchi, it branches further into bronchioles. And then the bronchioles lead to alveoli. That word might not sound exactly how you expect it to be. Alveoli. And alveoli are these little bundles that are where gas exchange is going to happen. So the oxygen that you've breathed in is now going to be brought into the veins to go back to the heart and transported to the body. The endothelium of the capillary and the alveolar wall are going to share a common basal lamina that helps direct oxygen flow through. And these form the alveoli capillary complex. After heavy rain, earthworms come to the surface. How would you explain this behavior in terms of an earthworm's requirements for gas exchange? All right, that's the last slide for this video. Come back, we'll talk a little bit more about breathing and what's going on in our bodies. Also, make sure that you are watching those two videos from the clip that we skipped over, whether you're going to watch it in the next video that I made or you download the slides and watch it yourself. I look forward to hearing you and hope to see you soon in class.